everyone, it's Carissa. Today I wanted to make a quick video on the Tubular Bind Off. This is a sewn bind off that grafts the knit stitches to the purl stitches and creates a very stretchy, very smooth bind off that mirrors the Italian cast on, or the tubular cast on, that I've used for this swatch here. You can see today I'm using it for a double knitting swatch where I have a layer of light green on the front, layer of dark green on the back. But you can just as easily use this exact same bind off technique with 1x1 ribbing or even brioche. Our first step is to cut a tail of yarn that is roughly 4 times the width of our piece. You want to give yourself a nice long tail to work with. And my swatch here starts with a purl stitch. You can do this starting with a knit stitch as well, and I will address that in just a moment. So starting with a knit stitch, I have threaded my yarn onto a tapestry needle, and I'm going to put that tapestry needle through that first purl stitch purlwise and pull it through all the way, but not too tight. And then I can drop that purl stitch off my knitting needle. Now I want to go through the second stitch on my needle, the next purl stitch. I want to go through that stitch knitwise, but I don't want to go through it knitwise just like this, because then I am pulling this yarn across the front of this knit stitch that we're skipping. I first want to go behind that knit stitch before I go through this purl stitch knitwise. So I'm going to take my tapestry needle and go from the back to the front. I'm going to go between those 2 stitches under my knitting needle and between the first and second stitches from back to front. I'll pull that through. So now I have brought my tail of yarn behind this knit stitch that we're skipping. Now I can go through that purl stitch knitwise from the front to the back and pull our tail through. Now I have a knit stitch as my first stitch on the needle. So if you had started your swatch with a knit stitch at the beginning, this is the point in the tubular bind off process where you would start. So I have a knit stitch as my leading stitch. I'm going to go through that knitwise, pull my tail through, make sure it's not looped around the stitches back there, and drop that stitch off my left needle, my knitting needle. Now I want to go through the second stitch purlwise, and I can actually just do that from the front here. Going in front of this purl stitch that we're skipping is just fine because it is a purl stitch. It's from the back layer of my double knitting, or if this were ribbing, it would also be fine to go in front of that purl stitch. So I'm going to go from the front, I'm going to go through that second stitch purlwise and pull my tail through. And that's it. That's the 4-step process. So if my first stitch is a purlwise, I'm going to go through it purlwise, pull my yarn through, and drop that stitch off my knitting needle. Then I want to go through the second stitch knitwise, but I want to go behind this knit stitch first. So from the back, I'm going to go between those 2 stitches and pull that through. And now I can go through the second stitch knitwise. And now my leading stitch is a knit stitch, so I will go through it knitwise, pull my tail through and drop it off the knitting needle, and then I can go through the second stitch purlwise from the front. Now, as you get used to this process, you can start combining steps if you like. So as I insert my needle through this purl stitch purlwise, I can drop it off the knitting needle at the same time, and then pull my needle through, pull my tail through. You don't have to. If you don't want to combine steps, you don't have to. And now I want to go through that second stitch knitwise but go behind this knit stitch first. So if I go between the needles, or between the stitches on the needle, and then if I want to combine steps, I can twist my needle around and grab that front leg of the second stitch and then go back down through that stitch knitwise. So let me show you that again. I'm going between the stitches on my needle from back to front, and then I'm rotating my tapestry needle around to grab the front leg of that green, that dark green purl stitch, and then I'm going to go through that dark green purl stitch knitwise from front to back and come back out the back. Again, if you don't want to combine steps, you don't have to, but it can make it a little bit easier. Now my leading stitch is a knit stitch, so I'm going to go through that knitwise and drop it off the knitting needle at the same time, and then I can just spin my needle around and go through the second stitch on my needle purlwise at the same time and bring my tail through. So leading stitch is a purl stitch, go through it purlwise and off the needle. And then go behind that knit stitch and go through the second stitch knitwise. Now my leading stitch is a knit stitch. I'm going to go through it knitwise and off the needle, and then through the second stitch purlwise and pull through. And you'll just repeat those 4 steps throughout your piece to graft the front layer to the back layer, or to graft your knit stitches to your purl stitches if you're working in ribbing. And that is the tubular bind off method. You can see that my front layer and back layer are grafted together just like my tubular or Italian cast on that I used here. If it's a little bit loose, that's fine. You can use your tapestry needle, come back here to the beginning of your bind off and just grab that first loop and tug it upward a little bit. Then grab the second and pull the slack up, and the third and pull that up, and just continue tightening it just a little bit with your tapestry needle to get the tension right to match the gauge of your overall project. There we go. That looks a little neater. So that is the tubular bind off for double knitting in this case, but you can also use it for 1x1 ribbing or brioche.